he up there? I'm waiting for him to give me that. Huh?
Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany. My name is Reverend Sam Trumbore, and I serve as minister of this congregation. Before we begin, a little intro for those on Zoom. Please check to make sure your microphone is muted. You can also turn your camera off if your image is potentially distracting. Please also be mindful of your speech while on Zoom, as microphones do have a way of accidentally becoming unmuted. This will minimize any disruption of our service. You will notice closed captioning at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to turn that off or on, find the CC option on your Zoom toolbar and select the up arrow to access it. Thanks so much for your cooperation. Many Unitarian Universalist congregations have begun a practice of doing a land acknowledgement. The purpose of the statement is to show respect for Indigenous peoples and recognize their enduring relationship to the land. Practicing acknowledgement can also raise awareness about histories that are often suppressed or forgotten. Our congregation sits on land originally occupied by people who called themselves the people of the waters that are never still, Mohican, today called Mohican. I contacted the Mohican surviving tribal community. They have formally authorized this statement. It is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that we are learning, speaking, and gathering on the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are the indigenous peoples of this land. Despite tremendous hardship in being forced from here, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors past and present as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. The Stockbridge-Muncie community asks that we read about Indigenous cultures, teach children about Indigenous cultures, pay attention to language and names, honor and make changes to the dominant narrative that glorifies colonialization and genocide of Indigenous peoples of this area. Problematic terms like Pioneer Valley are a reminder of that legacy of dispossession, removal, and subsequent erasure. Try shifting to Connecticut River Valley, for example. And finally, protest Native mascots, imagery, and cultural misappropriation. My call to celebration is a river invocation. Mohican Natuk, abundant source of life that nourishes and sustains your people, waters that constantly move and are never still. You link us all to the past, the present, and the future. Europeans came to claim you and name you as their own. They came on big ships and brought strange ways. They insisted on curious ideas about ownership of the land around you. You know, no one can own you any more than someone can own a piece of the sky. The land owns itself. and we are but temporary guests and stewards. These occupiers are willing to use violence to claim what was originally a gift exchange. They put up no trespassing signs to harm those who cross lines. They have little appreciation of native plants, animals, and foods. They have poisoned your waters through reckless industrialization. The old ways are forgotten by these squatters. But your ancient covenant partners have not died out. They remember the old ways. They hold in trust and memories of the before times. They hold in trust the language of indigenous peoples. They remember. They will endure. They will not abandon you. May we not abandon them as we join together in the celebration of life. Our prelude this morning is De Colores, a traditional Spanish folk song, and our musician is Bruce Holden. As Kathy lights our chalice, we can read the words together that you'll find on the screen. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the human spirit, to inspire its growth and development, to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. And we welcome our Facebook viewers to our service. My name is Reverend Sam Trumbore, and I have a reading for you this morning. This is an abbreviated, and as you listen, you'll say, wow, there's more than this. An abbreviated version of the responsive resolution passed at Unitarian Universalist General Assembly in June. It's titled, Creating a More Just Future Through Divesting from Pipelines and Investing in Young People. Whereas, that's how they start, whereas the report of the UUA General Assembly Progress on 2020 Business Resolution, and the title of that one was Embodying Human Rights in Our Investment Decisions, submitted by the UU Common Endowment Fund, shows what limited progress the UUA has made on the business resolution. And whereas the commitments uplifted in the report are: the Common Endowment Fund favors investment in companies with explicit human rights principles, encompassing the rights of indigenous peoples and immigrants, and addressing racial justice. We seek to invest in companies that fulfill the responsibility to respect human rights as articulated in the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and a company may be excluded if it provides significant financing or other financial services to, derives a material percentage of its revenue from, or sources a material percentage of its raw materials from a country or area, one, demonstrating a prolonged and systemic pattern of human rights violations, or two, where significant human rights violations have been widely documented. And whereas the Common Endowment Fund is currently invested in banks and other corporations that profit from fossil fuel extraction and the exploitation of human labor, the white supremacist intentions being uplifted by individuals in this General Assembly are a clear reflection of the intentions of these larger financial institutions. And whereas the Enbridge Line 3 pipeline is violating human rights by currently being built without the free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous nations. And several UU justice organizations and UU individuals recently took direct action to stop Line 3. And whereas youth and young adults are inheriting a world affected by these negative changes, felt first and primarily by Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color, marked by more unstable climate as well as socioeconomic conditions. And whereas the current social responsible investing guidelines, SRI, permitted the Common Endowment Fund to profit from corporations benefiting from exploitation, climate crisis, colonization, and ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, including, but not limited to, Enbridge, JP Morgan Chase, Amazon, Walmart, Bank of America, Uber Technologies, Facebook, ConocoPhillips, Comcast, General Mills, BlackRock, Microsoft, Chevron, Wells Fargo, and a number of other extractive corporations. Be it resolved that the 2021 General Assembly of the UUA urges the Common Endowment Fund to, one, create a transparent public process to encourage widespread and equitable participation of UU congregations, justice organizations, and individuals in the comprehensive review of the SRI guidelines with a clear timeline, and two, only undertake this comprehensive review of SRI guidelines with the active participation of at least five young adults, or 10% of the review committee, whichever is larger, as selected by a transparent process determined by wider UU young adult community at General Assembly. Be it further resolved that the 2021 General Assembly of the UUA urges the Common Endowment Fund to immediately and completely divest its holdings from financial institutions currently funding the Line 3 pipeline, including JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, and RBC. So end the reading. Something a little calmer is this Lakota prayer, which I believe we would categorize as a westernized interpretation of the original prayer, not in English. So hear that in the spirit of this Lakota tradition. And let us turn inward to receive these words. Great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds and whose breath gives life to the world, as I come before you, one of your many children, I am small and weak. I need your strength and wisdom. May I walk in beauty. May my eyes behold the red and purple sunset. May my hands respect what you have made. May my ears be sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise, so I may know what you teach in every leaf and rock. Make me strong, so I am able to fight my greatest enemy, myself. May I ever be ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so that when life fades like a sunset, I may come to you without shame. Let us take these words and our own thoughts, reflections, and prayers into a time of silence. As most of you know, this past June, I was elected to the Unitarian Universalist Association's Board of Trustees in a contested election. That victory came with a serious sense of responsibility to serve the many people who voted for me, as well as my opponent. I've been sampling different activities and committees of the UUA board to figure out where I can best serve. Co-moderator Meg Riley asked me to be the board's liaison to the Presidential Search Committee, nominating candidates to run for UUA president in a year and a half. Speak to me if you're interested. I've been attending bylaws discussions as the board considers overhauling the entire UUA bylaws with an anti-oppressive lens from the Commission on Institutional Change report 2 years ago. I've also been interested in the Values and Resources Committee, also known as the Finance Committee. The UUA raises and spends a lot of money, and I'm curious about the ways that they're doing it. And I like numbers. I attended my first meeting of that committee a week ago and was quite interested in the angst the UUA financial folks have been experiencing because of the responsive resolution I read portions of for you this morning. I imagine many, if not most of you, have no clue what a responsive resolution is. As I have been learning, going through the UUA bylaws, the owners of the UUA are UU congregations, not the individual members. Our delegates represent our congregation at our yearly meeting called General Assembly. The business done via resolutions are binding to the UUA board and to the UUA staff. In just a couple of days, at the end of June, very important decisions are made by delegates who are often poorly informed and easily swayed by skilled and emotional, sometimes manipulative rhetoric. In the last plenary session of General Assembly each year, after many people have gone home, because at the very end, there is the opportunity to propose and immediately pass a responsive resolution to some report or business item that has come up during the General Assembly's business. They are not formally binding, but do direct the UUA board to act on the behalf of the delegates. The delegates have the power, and a board operates for the delegates in between those few days that we meet. The divestment responsive resolution focuses on a fund called the UU Common Endowment Fund. The fund was created a few years ago to provide congregations with a safe, professionally managed, and profitable place to put their endowment money. The fund is a socially responsible investment, or SRI fund, that screens out harmful investments using lists of criteria. The UUA facilitates the fund's existence and manages its investments, but is restricted in the way it manages the money and the portfolio. The congregations and our congregation have put their precious endowment money into this fund, although our congregation has since taken it out, but a lot of people have money in this fund. The responsive resolution proposers did their research and looked at the SRI criteria the funds use. They saw a contradiction between the screening process and what companies were being held. In their interpretation, the big failure of application of our values to our resources came with investments related to the Line 3 pipeline. So, what is Line 3? Line 3 is a 1,000-mile oil pipeline from Alberta to Lake Superior that has been operating since 1968. It runs across the width of upper Minnesota, across Ojibwe traditional land. The pipeline is quite old and had construction quality problems from the beginning that resulted in several oil spills over the years, including a 1 million-gallon spill in Grand Rapids, Minnesota in 1991, the worst inland oil spill in U.S. history. The owner of the pipeline, Enbridge, has wanted to replace much of this pipeline and upgrade it so that it can carry more oil. The source of that oil? The Canadian tar sands, some of the worst, most costly, and most environmentally damaging oil extraction in the world. Investors have been moving away from tar sands oil because of some of these problems, and the Canadians haven't had a cheap and easy way to export it. This pipeline will give new energy to that extraction process. The members of our Green Sanctuary Committee, working to slow down and maybe someday, hopefully, reverse climate change, will tell you we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground and invest in renewable energy sources. One way to slow down the extraction process is with public commitments to no new fossil fuel infrastructure. Stopping new oil and gas pipelines is one very effective way to do that. Enbridge protests this thinking. With regard to Line 3, they say this isn't a new infrastructure, but rather a replacement of a leaky, dangerous old infrastructure. Yes, protesters respond, and Enbridge plans to increase the pipeline capacity too. The Ojibwe have additional reasons to stop new pipelines. Our wisdom story today gave some important insights into the dangers of the black snake attacking their land and especially their water. In the process of negotiating the new pipeline, Indigenous treaties from the 1800s haven't been respected. Those treaties establish hunting and fishing rights on the land the pipeline will cross and disrupt. The most sensitive food sources for them is the Manuman wild rice that grows in those areas. Ecosystems easily threatened by pipelines. And any water contamination with oil would be disastrous. There's are like many of the same arguments that were against the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock. The Ojibwe is not an insignificant tribe, by the way. They're one of the largest tribal associations spanning the US and Canadian border, surrounding much of the Great Lakes. And they are not alone in facing the dangers of climate change. The pressures to stop investing in fossil fuel infrastructure come with other tribes' interests as well. The abundant run of Chinook salmon in the Yukon River has been in decline for a decade. This year, the chum salmon plummeted. Alaskan natives have no salmon to stock their freezers for the winter. They're angry and want to know who to blame. What can be done to turn this situation around? And they're feeling powerless, that global climate change might be the most significant factor for the problem. Same could be said for the Navajo and the Hopi in northern Arizona, suffering a mega drought that has reservoirs at the lowest level in decades. Their cattle are dying, and herds are being forced to be thinned to use that precious water for agriculture. While all the while, folks are watering their lawns, golf courses, and filling their pools with valuable water in Phoenix. The Ojibwe peoples have fought the pipeline in court and relentlessly protested the slowdown to stop the pipeline construction. Some Unitarian Universalists have been active supporting their protests. This summer, UU young adults showed up to support the Anishinaabe water protectors for the Treaty People gathering in early June. The UU College of Social Justice, the UUSC, collaborating with the UUA, UU Ministry for Earth, and UU Justice Arizona raised funds to enable the young adult delegation to travel to Minnesota at the end of July to support their service to this cause, be it protesting, be it risking arrest, or even doing chores in the long-term camps. Allie Tharp, UU Ministry for Earth Director of Programs and Partnerships, put it this way: as a Unitarian Universalist young adult, I know at the core of me that life itself is on the line right now. I have a moral obligation to do everything in my power to shift the story and the trajectory of humanity, healing our relationship to life and living on this planet. 30 to 50% of all species on Earth could go extinct by 2050 if we do not make this change. I live my faith by joining this delegation to show up for the treaty rights and the leadership of the Anishinaabe, for the water and for the wild rice, for climate stability, and for all our relations. Ali's words went through my head as I listened again to the recording of the UU General Assembly debate over this resolution. It passed 80% to 16 to 4 abstentions. I understand why. The young adults were passionate in their speaking. Those who spoke against the resolution were older white guys, probably current or former treasurers or endowment fund managers. They know this isn't how you manage portfolios, even socially responsible funds. No funds divest in banks because of the loans they make currently. Immediate divestment of funds could cause significant losses to the funds. The money managers and the UUA board, in their oversight, have fiduciary responsibility to make sure their investments are protected from reckless investment practices. Legally, this kind of immediate divestment strategy could fall into that category. But sensible business as usual practices make no sense to these young adults staring into the climate change abyss. Divesting bank investments because of their lending practices does have some interesting novelty to it. This idea came from the water protectors as a way to put pressure on banks not to make these kinds of loans. And there are other reasons to question big banks as an investment. The student loan crisis comes to mind. There are so many students drowning in student loan debt that is crippling their ability to build lives for themselves, start families, buy homes, save for college for their own children, and maybe put money away, maybe for retirement. Also, the UUA has an interesting history with fossil fuels. The Shelter Rock UU congregation benefited from a bequest of North Shore oil leases that over the years have brought in hundreds of millions of dollars in returns. Several endowment funds have been set up with that money that fund the UUA, theological education, and large grants for social justice work. The Social Justice Fund gives millions of dollars away each year to do admirable work supporting Black, Indigenous, people of color organizations and movements. Many are direct, on-the-ground action organizations making really great differences, all with fossil fuel money, though I imagine these funds are more diversified today. And let's also appreciate the good uses of the UU Common Endowment Fund returns. Those earnings are keeping some of our UU congregations viable. They're paying to fix roofs, replace furnaces, buy solar panels, remove and renovate aging buildings. It's being used to pay staff salaries, help smaller congregations retain their ministers. And it's being used for social justice work too in people's communities. This fund holds the pooled assets of hundreds of our congregations who depend on those returns to function. I think the assets of this fund are about $250 million. It's a lot of money. Yet how good can any of us feel about making money by endangering the land and the lives of Ojibwe people? As I participated in the Values and Resources meeting, hearing the UUA financial staff wringing their hands over the non-negotiable demands and expectations of the young adults about divestment immediately, I thought to myself, these poor UUA staff shouldn't be holding this very difficult problem by themselves. They shouldn't be the ones triangulated between the fund's rules, currently followed SRI practices, and the young adults' demands. The investors in the funds should be involved in making these moral decisions. And not just the UUA should be reflecting on its investments. What about us? Should we be considering divesting from these very same banks for the reasons the water protectors have outlined? And if the banks knew that many people were choosing to move to different bank investments for their portfolios, then the banks participating in fossil fuel infrastructure loans, that action might make a difference. It could be a legitimate shareholder action to dump those stocks. If enough people did it in a coordinated fashion, it might get their attention. Over the years, I've seen the UUA and related UU organizations used as the punching bag for whatever social problem we've got. It's easier to lash out and to tell the UUA what it ought to do than bring those resolutions home and take them seriously here. What will our Albany UU endowment do with this responsive resolution? Are we willing to implement it with our endowment funds? How many of our GA delegates voted for it? This is part of responding morally and ethically to a troubled world seriously. And on a personal level, what am I willing to do with my personal investment funds? I've been diligently putting large chunks of what you pay me in my salary into TIAA investment funds in a plan that the UUA provides. And I'm going to look at those holdings to shift them around if the funds are heavily invested in these banks. Yet anyone living on the income from investments knows the importance of being widely diversified. And the best investments tend to be index funds. And those have holdings of a wide variety of stocks, some of them not socially responsible companies. Making enough to live on and doing good with one's money isn't an easy trade-off. I don't have easy answers to these questions. What I know is this isn't just the UUA's problem. Turning capitalism around toward serving human good rather than human greed, I think, is possible. But it can only happen when those with resources collectively work together to drive the changes. My hope is the UUA can lead, but not by itself. It needs our support and encouragement to do so rather than our criticism and judgment. After all, we are the Unitarian Universalist Association. And you are fortunate to have your voice amplified by my election to the UUA board. Let me know. We'll have some conversation after the service. Let me know what you think, what you feel, and what you believe should be done. I end my words there. So be it. See to it.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Harris, and I am the Service Associate today. An important way we celebrate life each Sunday is by offering an opportunity to practice generosity. Members and friends support our congregation with an annual pledge paid throughout the year. Another way to support the good work of this congregation is by making a generous contribution as we pass the plate, or via one of the options shown on this next slide. You can click on the tinyurl.com, or you may text. For example, to send $50 to the collection plate, text 50. To send $50 to your pledge, text 50 pledge. If you are it's right there. And we must now say goodbye to our Facebook friends. Consider joining us on Zoom next time, or visit us in person at 405 Washington Avenue. You can find more information at albanyuu.org. Our offertory music this morning is an instrumental improvisation of In the Branches of the Forest, Valdemar Hilly, and O Earth, You Are Surpassing Fair by Joseph Perry. Our musician is Bruce Holden.
I'll move one more stone for all the joys and sorrows that have been left unspoken. May we hold all that we've heard and felt in our hearts. And let us turn inward for these words. I think this is Susan Milner's words. Eternal One, progenitor, spirit of life, we are grateful for the companionship of hearts and minds seeking to speak the truth in love. We are grateful for our heritage, for the women and men before us whose prophetic words and deeds make possible our dreams and our insight. We are grateful for the gift of life itself, mindful that to respect life means both to celebrate what is and insist on what it can become. May we always rejoice in life and work to cultivate a sense of its giftedness, but may we also heed the call to transformation and growth. May we find in ourselves a strength to face our adversities, the integrity to name them, and the vision to overcome them. May we honor in pride the heroines and heroes of our past, but may we also keep company with the fallen, the broken, and the oppressed. For in the dazzling of noonday's heat, or in the star-studded shimmering of night's rich darkness, we are them. So be it. And let us close with our final song, Blue Boat Home, by R.H. Pritchard, Peter Mayer, arranged by Jason Sheldon, and our song leaders are Chris Jensen and Randy Rosette.
We extinguish the chalice. As we extinguish the chalice, please join in the words shown on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. The benediction I have, it's very good for who I am. It's called May We Hear the Melody of Life, and it was written by Joseph Cleveland. Joe is the minister at the Saratoga UU congregation. May we hear the melody of life and find ourselves singing harmony. May we be open to the dissonances in the song of the land and its people, that we might be part of the world's urging toward justice, peace, and love. May we feel in our bones the rhythms of life and the land and find ourselves dancing. Let's see, where am I here? Yeah, I think it's the thanks. Our thanks too. Our musicians, Bruce Holden, Randy Rosette, and Chris Jensen. Our ushers, Dawn Dana, Alda Salvo, Kristen Abbas, Jean Poppy, and Annika Pfluger. Our pastoral care associates, Chuck Manning and Randy Rosette. I was a service associate, Kathy Harris. Our welcomers, Don Odell and Barb Manning. Our greeter was Jean Bolgatz. Our office support is Tammy Hathaway and Patience Pichette. Technical support, Chris Jensen, Dick Dana, and Kate Pierce. And the flowers were donated and arranged today by Barb Manning in memory of Chuck's mom, Jeanette Manning. Don't know of any announcements. There, these ones here? Yep. All right, I can do that. You know. Our online family chapel begins tonight at 6:30. For the Zoom link, please email Elizabeth at dre@albany.uu or Paula, reassist@albanyuu.org. The Walker Book Group meets tonight at 6:30. Learn more at albanyuu.org. You are invited to join Dr. Michelle Grove for workshops on our religious education identity. The next opportunity is Thursday, 10/14 at 7 p.m. Learn more at albanyuu.org. And a walk for climate change across the Rip Van Winkle Bridge on the afternoon of Sunday, October 17th, next week. Contact Chris Bystroff, myself, Kathy Harris, or Barb Spinks for information and carpooling. And there will be a virtual orientation for newcomers, getting to know UU, Saturday, October 23. This is a chance for some of us at Albany UU to get to know you. Learn more at albanyuu.org.